Welcome everyone. Today I'll be talking about ChatGPT. To be honest, when I first heard of ChatGPT, I was pretty skeptical. I've played around with a few chatbots in the past, but they always fell short of expectations. The underlying model, GPT-3, was released almost 3 years ago. The ChatGPT implementation of that model was released in November 2022. Its main purpose was really to demo the capabilities of GPT, and the largely positive viral response was completely unexpected. More recently, in 2023, GPT version 4 was launched and integrated into ChatGPT. When I tried it out, I was quite blown away. While it does make mistakes, the responses are still very useful, relevant, fast, and it feels like you're actually talking to a person. It achieves this with its highly complex model. ChatGPT is a deep learning neural network for natural language processing, or NLP. The current version has 175 billion parameters compared to the previous version's measly 1.5 billion. It is based on a deep learning architecture called a transformer, first introduced in 2017. It's now pretty much a standard for NLP. The main feature is a self-attention mechanism, which allows the system to consider different parts of the input when generating the output. This makes it far more effective at dealing with the complexities of human language, especially English, able to take into consideration the context and structure of the prompt. ChatGPT is trained through unsupervised learning, processing vast amounts of text data without any explicit guidance or feedback. Its training dataset included 45 terabytes of web pages and 11,000 books, making it the most comprehensive language model available today. A few insights I've had while playing around with it. It remembers your session, so you can ask it to make adjustments to past responses or add to them. You can include a lot of detail in the prompt to direct the response, for example, language, writing style, intended audience, bullet point, written script, etc. It's open to discussion. It might reject a request on ethical or similar grounds, but you can try to convince it to change its view with a sound argument. This does not always work. In some cases, it sticks to its decision. This creates an interesting dynamic of rational discussion and choice. It can generate multiple responses to a single prompt, providing a variety of options to choose from. It can solve a bunch of challenges or problems. The top six that I have tested are these. First, generating content. It does a pretty good job of this. I can give it a description or a list of bullet points, and it will generate what I would consider maybe a first draft of an article or other body of text. It still needs editing before I would share it with anyone, but this step alone probably saves me an hour or two. I've not encountered much limits on the type of content it can generate given the right prompt, anything from articles to emails to pitches and movie scripts. It also dabbles in riddles, jokes, poems, but results may vary. It can create content in several languages and it can translate between languages. For the latter, it can contextualize as well as translate, changing names and locations to suit the new language, if requested. It can draw from that massive dataset to research, find bits of information, and answer questions. It'll also provide a source reference if you ask for it. I would note that I've had mixed results with this, so you should really fact check anything it gives you. Things could be wrong or simply outdated. Its speaking capability was more impressive than any other chatbot I have tried, including the various big tech assistants that are available. It's able to understand context, multiple points, or asks made in a single sentence, and other language complexities far better than any other chatbot. You can even get it to change its mind if you present a sound argument. It sometimes creepily feels very human. Another commercial application that it excels at is creating summaries of large pieces of content, like big documents, books, articles, and similar. You can indicate the length of summary and other directions to get the result that you want. This will be the go-to tool, I think, for students tasked with creating book reports. Lastly is personalization. If you give it a persona description of an individual or group, it can customize its response for that persona, either as the persona, so it's talking as if it's that persona, or with that persona being the audience, so it's talking to the persona. This trick can be applied to any of the other items here. There are also some issues to keep in mind, however. The dataset it was trained on was current up to 2021, so some information it provides may be inaccurate or stale at this point. This does seem to be being updated with newer versions of the model. Similarly, ChatGPT needs to be trained on data, so it does not have real-time connection to the internet for current events or recent data. However, a recent plugin capability can offer this for specific sources. These 2 points do reduce its value as a research assistant, but it does not make it redundant. I certainly look forward to the day when they will keep its data set more current, though. ChatGPT is a general purpose AI. This means that specific applications or contexts may need fine tuning or further training for them to be effective. There may be biases and inaccuracies that it took from the data it was trained on, so keep this in mind when reviewing the results. It also presents facts with a very high degree of confidence, making it very easy to believe them, but sometimes it may just be wrong. Always fact check statements with a third party or resource. Transparency, the model is effectively a black box. It's too complex to really understand how it makes certain decisions and responses. A few topics and areas have been filtered out. To be fair, most of these make sense. The filters and the blockers in newer versions, ChatGPT 4, for example, seem to be far more stringent and harder to circumvent. Some that I found include gambling, any kind of financial or investment advice, legal advice, offensive or harmful content, and medical advice. Right, that's enough chatter. Let's look at some actual examples. So these are going to be screen prints because I don't trust technologies to succeed in a live demo, but I encourage everyone to try out ChatGPT themselves later. You can sign up for free, but you might not have access during peak periods. One thing that the screen prints won't show you is the speed at which you get results. Each of the following examples was returned to me really within seconds of asking. As a consultant, I often need to simplify technical topics for my less technical stakeholders so they can understand them. Here we explain cloud computing to a 5-year-old. I mentioned a few times that ChatGPT is open to reasonable discussion on topics it would otherwise rather avoid. In this example, I asked it to rewrite Snow White, but to make her the villain. I noted that the target audience would be young children. ChatGPT was uncomfortable with this, rejecting me on the grounds that changing that would not be appropriate and it would confuse young children. However, I pointed out that there is value in viewing a story from different perspectives and to teach children to question one-sided narratives. It agreed with this point and actually proceeded to retell the story as I asked for. Asking for a promotion can be daunting. What do you say? How to frame it in a way that doesn't sound maybe arrogant or entitled? Just ask ChatGPT. A couple of weeks ago, we ran out of bedtime stories and been a bit busy, not had a chance to buy some new books. No problem with ChatGPT on speed dial. Here is a little fairy tale that it came up with, quite Funny and short. My wife likes to read them Chinese stories to help improve their use of the language. And also no problem for ChatGPT, just translate and contextualize the previous story to ancient China. Okay, back to something more work related. Now, we all have days when we are a bit too tired to troll through endless documentation looking for some guidance. Instead, try a prompt. What about content? Let's say I'm working on an article and need some relevant facts that I can drop into it. ChatGPT has my back, but don't forget to fact check these. Also keep in mind that you won't really get anything newer than 2021 with GPT-3, though that does seem to be improving in newer versions like version 4. But let's say I've been slacking off and I need to quickly get an article out before the end of the quarter. I have my list of facts, but nothing written yet. No problem, just ask ChatGPT to step up. Same approach if you have your own set of bullet points or notes for an article you are planning to write. Another one, our friend is struggling to prepare his resume just nice for Amazon Web Services. Just point him to ChatGPT to get the assistance he needs. This one will be especially appreciated by team members that have worked with me on consulting engagements. Here are my meeting notes. Note that I shortened participant names to J and T after the first full use of the name. Note the terrible grammar, one-word questions, etc. Very difficult to read, definitely not something you want to send to a client. Bam, result. Almost suitable to send to the client. It does need some work, but note that it recognized the shortened names and used the correct full names in the meeting minutes for each point and the little summary at the top there. It's not perfect. The second bullet point about core teams doesn't really make sense, but still you can definitely see how much time this might save, especially when you consider that the actual notes are probably 10 times longer and we're doing 2 or 3 discussions like this per day for a whole week. Another great use case that a friend mentioned to me is generating test data such as fake PII or personal information records. Note that age and birthday results in 2021 for all records. You could probably fix this by noting the current year to ChatGPT in your request. Also note that the country code in the phone number matches the country that was generated. ChatGPT understands the context and relationships between these data points. The favorite movie is similarly a local movie in each record, but that might be a bit odd. So if it's not something you want, you could just tweak the response to ask for a change after the initial result is returned. My request was for just 5 records, but for actual testing, we might want hundreds or even thousands. It would actually be useful to have maybe a simple JavaScript function to search through that array. Result. Both the function and a description of the function at the bottom there. By the way, the chat response is limited and it might not return the full result if it's large. However, after the first result, you can tell it to continue the response and it will return another page of data, which you can repeat until you get everything. Going back to the function, let's say I'm not a great JavaScript developer and need some help using the function that was just provided. Included in the first response is actually an example showing just that. A slightly different use case is with a Google Spreadsheet, ChatGPT plugin. You install the plugin and provide an OpenAI API key to get started. You can create these in your account. We can perform searches with the plugin and ask it to find and list high-value Singapore fintechs, for example. This example is floating around the internet in a few variations. However, keep in mind that the data is at best from 2021 if you're using ChatGPT version 3. It may be stale, such as Ruben Lai here, who actually left Grab Finance last year. Also keep in mind that sometimes GPT just makes up stuff that looks pretty plausible. For example, in another test, I asked it to include their LinkedIn profile links. It included some very realistic, correct-looking LinkedIn URLs, but when I clicked them, usually they were either invalid or for someone else with the same name. When we have a verified list of relevant people, we can use ChatGPT to generate personalized messages for them to reach out on LinkedIn, for example. The plugin supports a bunch of other functions that can be used in different ways. Lastly, have a little fun. The results can be hilarious or a bit cringy. A Dr. Seuss poem on cloud migration, perhaps? Or some terrible dad jokes that are so bad that they are actually funny. At least I found them funny. Lastly, here's a few more ideas that I have tried. It can support you with studying AWS certification exams. You can ask it to explain matters and to test your knowledge by giving you questions. Large bodies of text can be created, but there is a limit to the response size in the chat UI. If the response seems to be missing some content at the end, just ask it to continue, and it will do so in a new response. This is not always perfect. I found that it sometimes repeats a different variation of some of the content already provided, but you can get more content and get to the end of whatever the response is supposed to be this way. You can also plan ahead and break the text down into sections and then just go through it with a request for each section. You can copy a text into it and ask for a review to fact check statements and to suggest additional facts or content that would complement your text. Again, keep in mind it's knowledgeable up to 2021 or perhaps later in newer versions. Just check that. Within a single session, you can do some light kind of training to get a particular response in your following queries. This seems to work much better in ChatGPT 4 because it has a longer memory, if you will. For example, you can tell it to provide each response going forward formatted as JSON, or you can ask it to map inputs to a particular set of outputs that you define. You can also establish fixed requirements such as language, writing style, etc., things like that, really for all responses within this session, and ask it to respond using your name for a more conversational experience. You can also kind of train it with your own content, so you can copy a bunch of your own past articles into it and tell it to use that style for all following responses. Lastly, GPT-4 has recently been released and has also been integrated into ChatGPT. Besides overall improvements to the model, GPT-4 has multimodal capabilities, as in you can ask it to analyze an image, video, or audio file besides the current text input. Now, I think this is available through the API, but not yet in ChatGPT. And that brings us to the end, so head over to this URL and give it a try. Let me know if you find any more funny or useful use cases.